this is an event that is sponsored by the Quaker Earthcare Witness UN Working Group. And we are focusing this year on water issues. The project of the Quaker UN Working Group involves the recognition of the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent. Last year, we convened a side event during the UN High-Level Political Forum for Sustainable Development on food sovereignty. And that event, we want to follow up again this year with focusing on water issues. This webinar that we're engaged in today looks at water in the diaspora and beyond. And a number of the people that are online as panelists or consultants we've been in discussion around water issues for some of us for a year or more. Next year, we will be looking at, we will be returning to food and land issues again. If you look at our website, the Earthcare Coalition, the UN Decade for People of African Descent, you'll see more about what our activities are, not only around land and water. We will be alternating years, but there's lots more information about the coalition members, and the activities that we'll be undertaking. So here's an example of some of our partners in the coalition, and you may recognize a number of groups and entities there. I invite you to take a look at the website to find out more about what we're doing. We are recording this webinar, and it will be made available through other venues such as YouTube, on the coalition website, and so on. So thank you again for joining us. One of the things that we looked at last year and we've been talking about is the who is in the diaspora, and why we speak of beyond the diaspora. We're looking at, there are more than 200 million people of African descent who recognize themselves as African descent living outside of Africa. And most notably, we look at the triangle that you see here. And so we're following not only those 200 million people who are living outside of Africa, but we have connections also with people on the continent, and a number of those. And we welcome, we have one of our presenters today is actually in Kenya, and we'll get to meet her in just a minute. So I've already mentioned some of what we're doing in the Water Circle. We will be convening a side event in July, again in collaboration with the High-Level Political Forum, and we'll be building on last year's side event. We're also doing research and information dissemination regarding water issues. The most recent issue of Quaker Earthcare Witness, Befriending Creation, has a link, two articles on water issues. One is co-written by the clerk of the UN Working Group, Pamela Bowie-Sims, and myself, and the other is on a project that I worked on in Miami. And then we'll be preparing for next year's activities of the Land Circle that will be hosted, will be clerked by Sarah Green with the Unitarian Universalists. So today's panel, I mentioned Nancy Abwalaba Owano, Dr. Abwano, with Pwani University in Kenya. Kimberly L. Fogg, the founder and CEO of Global Sustainable Partnerships. Rabia Al-Noor, an educator and medicine woman with Spring of Light. Fred Tutman, the riverkeeper and CEO of Patuxent River, and I'm going to get it right, Fred. And then myself, I'll be contributing a little bit at the end. I'm the field secretary for Earthcare for Southeastern Yearly Meeting for the Religious Society of Friends. So we also have several consulting partners. And I say consulting partners, not only are they partners in the coalition, but they've been working with us on water issues. Joseph Akiyo, who's the president and CEO of Support Aid Ministry, Kisumu, Kenya. Maya Carrasquillo, PhD student at the University of South Florida, who's working on engineering for the food, energy, water nexus in Black communities. Dr. Cheryl Rodriguez, who's an associate professor and director of the Institute on Black Life at the University of South Florida. Charles Sharp, the CEO and of the Black Emergency Managers Association International. That is not Charles, this is Dr. Rodriguez, and Dr. Meyer Trotz, who's associate professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of South Florida. So with that introduction, I will, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Nancy Abwalaba. And if you'd like, Dr. Abwalaba, I'll advance your slides for you. Thank you.
Sorry, I've been off. I've just come back.
Okay. Well, you were just in time.
Yeah. So I don't know what you have said before.
Well, I'm introducing you. And if you are ready to begin your presentation, I will advance your slides for you. Would you mind adjusting your screen a little bit? We're only getting like the top 2/3 of your head. There we go. Okay, thank you.
Now.
Okay.
I'm trying to see where my slides are.
Okay. Well, can you see them on the screen?
Well, I have gotten. So you want to present it again? You want me to present it again?
Yes.
Oh, okay, fine. I was looking at, I did a small study in Kenya, and I was looking at gender budgeting in the water sector. This is because of the importance of access to drinking clean water and all that. And therefore, I started by looking at the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which ensures access to, it recommends access to water and sanitation for all. And so the study had this hypothesis: insufficient investment in clean and safe water provision results in tremendous economic losses. And so it's like high investment in water related infrastructure may result in high income for households and higher revenues for the government, and of course economic growth. And so for this study, I went into 2 areas, that is Mwingi and Yatta. Mwingi is actually located in an area that we would call arid, and Yatta is located in an area where there's a little bit of rain. But what I found interesting, the government has really invested in water points in Yatta, unlike Mwingi. And so when I went to Mwingi, I discovered, having carried out a study, or in the process of carrying out my study, I went to various households. Those were about 30 households in Mwingi and 30 households in homesteads in, homesteads in Yatta. And then we realized that in Mwingi, most of the time was spent trying to fetch water. That is, walking to a water point. It took over 4 hours to walk to the place and walk back to just access water. And of course, it also took a lot of time for these people to, on the queues, you know, once you reach there, you have to queue. And I managed to take some snaps where there were long queues, although I did not put them there. The one I found was just a little bit of it, you know, a clip of it, a glimpse of it, where there are containers and people are, you know, actually desperate for water. And you also realize, I took some photos where you realize people are using donkeys to try and access this water. That is in Mwingi. So in a nutshell, in Mwingi, so much time is spent trying to access water. And apart from this time that is spent in trying to access water, they also suffer from waterborne diseases. And because of that, the woman is made to stay home, the girl child is made to stay home to try and take care of those who are suffering from waterborne diseases or those who are not well. And the one thing that I may not have mentioned in this slide is that even trying to access health facilities for these people is a little bit difficult because they do not have health schemes, you know, insurance covers and such things. So the only place they go to access is a health center. And once they get to the health center, they find the doctors are there, the nurses are there, but there are no drugs. So what they do, they are diagnosed, they are prescribed for some drugs and told to go to a chemist to go and buy. And of course, looking at these people again, we looked at the income of these people, of household, and we realized they actually do not have much to put on their table. They earn sort of like less than $1. They live by less than $1 per day. And so when you tell such a person to go and buy drugs, it becomes difficult. And so we realized that in Mwingi, most of the girls did not actually go to school, despite the fact that we have free primary education. This issue of water, accessibility to water, has spilled onto the girl child not actually accessing the so-called free primary education because of the challenges that I have mentioned. In Yatta, meanwhile, they are engaged because they are able to access water. I have already mentioned that the government actually had invested a little bit in water, so they were able to access water points not very far from, you know, one another. So the queues were not there. They are able to access, they are able to do their farming. And when we looked at their income, the household income, we realized they were doing better than the people in Mwingi. And so I went into giving the findings of the study, and I said, or we mentioned that accessibility to clean water in Mwingi is a big challenge due to the time taken, and also that makes the income to be very low because they spend most of the time in just fetching water and not paid work or paid economy. And then due to the poor quality of water, of course, there is the problem of health and so on. And then we were saying accessibility to health facilities is also an issue. And the opportunity cost is actually a big loss. You know, there is a lot of time wasted, and instead of using that time to do something that can earn engage in income generating activity, you find that that time is lost when it comes to Mwingi, and it is a big problem. So the issue is that there is need to invest heavily, need for the government to invest heavily in water infrastructure, especially in the area of Mwingi, so that these people can turn their time into a more productive work. So generally, that is what I came up with in this study. and we are still seeing water being a basic need. It's very important. It has other effects on the community or society that we may not be seeing at the surface. I think that's what I came up with in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. I will ask participants, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I would like for you to hear all the panelists present, and then we can have an open discussion at the end, and I will moderate the question and answer period. But this is to be sure that everyone gets a chance to, a fair amount of time to present. Our next presenter is Kimberly L. Fogg, who is the founder of Global Sustainable Partnerships. And I will also advance your slides for you, Kimberly, if you're ready, and we will move to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I apologize. There was something going on with the volume. So I hope everyone is doing well this morning. Good morning, or afternoon now.
Or evening.
Evening for Nancy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jumbo, Nancy.
Jambo, jambo. Jambo sana.
Good. I'm Kimberly Fogg, and like Beverly said, the name of my organization is Global Sustainable Partnerships, and we provide access to clean water using hydrate biosand filters for children in primary and secondary schools, households, orphanages, and health dispensaries. The reason why I created GSP, as it's called, is because I saw that there was a lack of clean water, especially for children in the Serengeti while I was on safari. And I realized that these children were actually walking miles and miles and miles in the middle of the Serengeti, where there's lions and tigers and bears, oh my, trying to fetch clean water for their oxen and for their families. So what we did was we went to talk to about 100 women in the villages and asked them about, you know, how they got their water every day and if they had access to water every day. And then when we talked to these women, they told us that not only do they have limited access to water, that there's typhoid and cholera run rapid in those communities. And so as a result, GSP was born, and we decided to start in the classrooms because I thought that if the children had access to clean and safe drinking water, that would put them on an even playing field of being able to go to school and to learn. And I also thought that the children would be the ones that would go to their parents and tell them that they had access to clean water, and that the parents would then see that their children were feeling better. Mothers would be able to go to work because they wouldn't have to stay home with a sick child because of waterborne diseases. So we started off with working with the local government, and we're working with local women's groups. And as a result, we had 138 schools that we were asked to provide access to clean water. We're only in about 60 of those schools right now. And these are our biosand, our hydrate biosand filters. And it's amazing technology. It's basically sand and gravel. The sand cuts off the oxygen supply of the pathogens that cause the waterborne diseases. And the ones that can survive in the sand, we drown them with water. So it holds 40 liters of water, and you actually just take any surface water and you pour it in the top of the filter, and then it's works through gravity. So if the water comes above that water line, if you can see where that little spigot is, then the water will come out. But if the water's below the water line, the water won't come out. And I tell people it's like a big plant. You have to make sure that you have water in it at all times, 2 inches above the sand, and it is 99.9% free of any pathogens that can cause waterborne diseases. These are our children, our beautiful children in one of our primary schools. One of the things that we realized is that we were offering our children access to clean water, but they were receiving their clean water in contaminated containers. So what you see there are BPA-free water bottles. So the children have clean water bottles to access their clean water out of the filters. And these types of bottles don't break down in the hot sun. So we're not contaminating our children with plastic plastic seeping into their water. We also taught our children how to use, they're called tippy taps, and it's by washing their hands. 60% of diseases are transferred through just touching one another. So the beautiful thing about this slide is we taught the kids how to create their own tippy taps, and they created tippy taps at their own homes. But what they did is they improved their tippy taps. They actually took a string and tied it to a tree and put a pedal on there so that they could push down the pedal and the water would tip over and they could wash their hands. It was so exciting to see that. These kids are so amazing. So that's one of our students. This was my very first school when I wanted to go in and start talking to the kids about access to clean water. And the kids were looking at me and screaming and running and saying, Mzungu, Mzungu. And I was screaming and running, saying, no, 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 come back. And then this one little child reached out his hand and said, Shkamo Dada, which is, you know, how are you, auntie? And so when I reached out and said, you know, marahaba, my love, all the kids surrounded me with love. So that was when I knew that I was where I was supposed to be. And the children were so amazing and loving and just so appreciative. So as a result of this, we are now in 60 schools and 208 households, 3 orphanages, 57 faith-based and government health facilities, and 1 district hospital. And that's where we are. Beverly, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you for alerting me to that. I'll remind everyone, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, and we will get to them after everyone has had a chance to present. I'm going to move now to—
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you. To Rabia El-Noor with Spring of Light. And Rabia is going to talk about honoring our sacred rivers. I don't see, we were hoping that Fred would be able to join us. Fred might be on the line.
I'm here.
Oh, very good. So Rabia and Fred, I just had Rabia slide up, but Fred Tuckman, and Fred, will you please pronounce the name of the river for us?
It's Patuxent.
Patuxent River Keeper and CEO, and you see the, I've been mangling the name of the river, Fred, so thank you very much. The mission of the River Keepers, and so I will let Fred and Rabia take it and to talk with us about rivers.
Well, I'm not online right now, so I'm not seeing what anyone is seeing, if anyone's seeing something.
We have, Fred, we have, I have your mission statement up and a picture from the website of the river.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the founder of Patuxent River Keeper, although it's a part of a broader international water-based movement. But I was drawn to doing water work because of my sense of spiritual connection to water generally. And I've lived and worked in various parts of the world. And as one of the earlier speakers was pointing out, you know, water is something that people don't take for granted in many parts of the world. I think we do in many places in the United States. We've actually done a lot of advocacy work in water arenas. The most notable one that came to my mind while listening to some of the earlier presentations was in mobile home parks, where people have processed water supplied to them that is sometimes, frankly, not potable, and yet people who are have scarce resources, they're poor, and do not have the capacity sometimes to challenge the management over the quality of the water being piped in. For one, recently, we had people having stomach cramps, literally going to the hospital. It turned out there were descaling chemicals being put into the water supply, and they weren't telling the residents, basically rust inhibitors people were ingesting. So the problems or disparities connected with water are huge. And it's kind of bringing us back to the work that the Rabia's group and the Patuxent Riverkeeper have done. Our attempts to connect people back to their local watersheds and water-based concerns through local community-based advocacy led to this working relationship with Spring of Light and other groups. With the help of these various groups, set up these events along the water, Patuxent, which by the way is an Algonquin word, I'm told, that meant either water running over smooth stones, or Patuxent sometimes meant a beautiful woman. I've been told both by people who were somewhat familiar with what remains of the Algonquin tongue. Rabia helped me out here to help visualize what the events looked like and felt like. Help me with that part. Am I still on?
Yes, you're still on. I'm trying to see where Rabia is. Okay, Rabia, are you still with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Fred and Carol Henry Alexander, who's an artist, and I had conversations out at the Patuxent River about doing something spiritually connected to the river and to the water, and educational pieces to educate people about how important their relationship is with water. And so prior to the climate march last year, we got together and we did 4 ceremonies around the river. We did an art build out for the signs that would be carried at the march that brought attention to the rivers, and Fred did education around the river and what the riverkeeper's job is, about his passion for the river. And he's the only, I believe, African-American riverkeeper that there is in the U.S. And so we wanted to lift that up too, and get people to understand that this is such an important role and get kids interested to come forth with that. So in that, my connection is because of the spiritual underpinnings of what I do in terms of ceremony at rivers, at the ocean, at all water, and really bringing the attention to people's consciousness that water is such a huge part of our makeup, and the responsibility, because it is a sentient living entity that communicates with us as we communicate with it, that we can uplift, we can heal, we can ourselves and the water, and to bring forth in people's minds that honoring the water in terms of ceremony, prayer. I think Dr. Emoto was talking about through his study about waters and scientifically proving that water is a sentient being. Just by speaking to it, you can change its makeup from harsh words to deform water crystals to loving thoughts and spoken words to making beautiful snowflake-like crystals. So imagining what that can do in terms of turning this situation around in terms of the water quality, if people were fully conscious and present in their speech and in their, because when you deform that water, the water, by the way we speak, then you're intaking that, and we see a lot of diseases and things. And the turnaround of this, I was listening to one of the other speakers in terms of the chemicalized medicine, but just think if we go back to our own knowledge, and around the water, there are all sorts of medicine plants. There's so much wisdom in our community about herbal medicine that we can reach back and bring forward and present and teach even to children. We can turn a lot of these situations around. So Fred has been just awesome in terms of doing the ceremonies, bringing people to his river, speaking out all over about the chemical dumping, having to go into court. And Fred, I'll let you speak for yourself about that. But yeah, that was part of what we did together.
Well, I got to admit, when the offering to Mother Nature involved tossing fruit into the river, the pollution instincts kicked in instantly. Oh my gosh, do we need a permit for this? Was the first thought that sprung to my mind. But I get the spirit of it. I'm used to discouraging people from throwing stuff into my river. But what I thought was
fabulous, things that are consumable and biodegradable in a good way.
Precisely, right. So I thought the energy of these events were very powerful, and I'll share a confidence. One of the concerns that I've always had about organized environmental movements is that they tend not to be particularly diverse. And I think it's incumbent on the nation's only Black riverkeeper to have some sensitivity to creating space where anybody and everyone is welcome to participate and be engaged. And these events had the kind of energy I've been searching for. We'd actually had events before at our waterfront location, and people would come up to me and say, you know, I really don't feel comfortable here. It seems like there are a lot of really either wealthy people or a lot of others, people that just, there was just a vibe or a dynamic that didn't feel entirely inclusive at some of our earlier events. And so I feel like we finally hit upon I don't want to call it a formula because it makes it sound like we're doing, something repetitive. We're not. We're trying to make each of these events, tailor them to the circumstances and to the people and to the events present. But that I was very excited about that dynamic, the idea that anyone were welcome, regardless of where they came from and what they looked like and what their particular faith, practice was. That was powerful. So that's the kind of a movement I've always wanted to be a part of.
And one of the other things I want to say is, too, coming from traditions in Africa and everywhere else, we have such a rich to draw from in terms of honoring water, because I believe that when you really create that strong bond and conscious relationship with water, even just in terms of putting it in a glass and speaking to it in healing and loving terms, and then when you're consuming that, it's healing your body as well as you're healing the water itself. And part of our ceremonies is to pull water from the rivers and to then pray with it and offer our support of the water, and then to send it back into the river to, as each cell of every drop of water goes back into that river, will then affect all the other cells and water within the rivers. And then as it goes up into rain and goes somewhere else, all of those things are being carried and to helping the healing of the water. So I still on?
Yes, you are.
I'm sorry, I heard a boop, boop, but maybe it was the water. But the other thing is, I'll wrap this up real quick. I just wanted to say that it's very, to me, imperative that we bring that consciousness into the diasporic communities, because with everybody so inundated with so many everyday problems and things, this is something so easy, I guess, in some respects to do, but to train ourselves and our children to be very conscious. And when we called upon the ancestors that lived along the rivers here, as we did the ceremonies, you should see the pictures of the orbs that came down from the sky and landed on the ground, where those energies. And at one of the rivers, when we poured libations and asked for the healing of the water and all beings that lived within the water, and we asked the creative force to support these ceremonies, the water turned from a golden streak across the water into a violet colored one, in answer to the water we were pouring back in. And so I really know in my heart that if we respect the water and we teach that the water will work with us.
Yeah, I would say in closing that the take home for me was that this kind of event ups the power of convening. For those of us who want to organize and convene communities around issues of common concern, there's no better way to do that but by doing that around the subject of water. And people typically treat water as a destination. This event treated water as a stakeholder, as a part of the community. I go to lots of river festivals in the course of my work, and this was the first one in a long time that didn't try to draw people to the river on the basis of a pony ride, a moon bounce, a jet ski, right, and something mechanized that you had to pay for. This was a very organic event that I thought actually served as a basis, a springboard for building stronger community. So that's what I think the take home is. Thank you. Thanks for the forum. Thanks for letting us share.
Oh, well, thank you both, and hang in here. I really appreciate that, and we will take in the discussion. I already have some questions for both of you. I'm going to take the host prerogative right now and pose a few questions for you that have been troubling me. As I mentioned, Nancy Abwalaba and I met about 4 years ago in India, and we have not seen each other except over Zoom since then. However, we do know a bit about each other's work, and one of the things that I've been looking at is sea level rise in Florida and beyond, particularly in what geographers call the American Mediterranean, which is the Caribbean basin and part of the South Atlantic. And Florida is just, because I live in Florida and because of some things I know about Florida, I have been looking in comparing and looking at considerations of sea level rise and other extreme events. As you know, the American Mediterranean area is, we have hurricane season. It'll begin in June this year and go through November. And we have an abundance of water, and then we have a dearth of water. We're losing a lot of our aquifer in Florida. It's being pumped out, it's being polluted by farming and so on. So I took the county of Kalihi, where Nancy has done a lot of her work, and compared it to 6 counties, which you see highlighted in Florida. And one of the counties, Hillsborough, is where I live. And so there, you'll get more of this. A little bit about Kalihi. It's one of Kenya's 47 coastal counties. It's relatively poor. You see the land there. The population is estimated at about 1.5 million. And I have another table that does more comparison of the 6 counties in Florida. Those 6 counties are Hernando, Pasco, Hillsborough, Tampa, where I live, Manatee County, Sarasota, and Pinellas. They're also coastal counties, and they are roughly the same, as you can see here, the same square miles as Kalihi. Well, it's about 3 times as the square miles of Kalihi. Let me clear that up. There we go. The total counties, the population of the 6 counties is about 3 times that of the population of Kalihi. This is a 2016 estimate. The Black or African American population and of the total 6 counties is a little bit under 500,000. It's about the Hillsborough County, Tampa, where I live, is about almost 18% Black. On average for the 6 counties, it's almost 12%, which is a little lower than the average population of the Black population of the Florida and the Black population in the U.S. Is about 17%. This slide that you're looking at shows the concentration of the Black population by census tracts. And as you can see, if there's a lot of water, what I don't have overlaying here is the number of like inland water. The Hillsborough River runs through Hillsborough County, so there's lots of water all around this area. And what I would like, this is drilling down to the Tampa Bay area, which gives you a better shot. This is with 6-foot sea level rise in the Tampa Bay area, which is, according to some recent research that's come out, that the sea level rise in the Southeast United States, and particularly in Florida, is occurring more rapidly than had originally been thought. And you have a better idea now of the water, the inland water that I talked about, and well, you see the green highlights in here. This is areas that are known to flood. So there are other considerations that we talk about in terms of low income communities. We have MacDill Air Force Base down here, and we know that the U.S. military has already said that one of the greatest threats to the U.S. is climate disruption. So with this in mind, I'm particularly concerned about when either sea level rise or one of the storms hits Florida, where will people of African descent go? And most recently, after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, within 6 weeks, more than 150,000 people from Puerto Rico had relocated to Florida. So we have the impacts of the storm on Floridians, and then Floridians also become a receiving community for people who are displaced. So where would, this 1.5 million African Americans, where would they go? And some of with Hurricane Irma, we know that most likely the African Americans would go to the north, namely Atlanta, other parts of Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. And these are historical and ancestral centers for people of African descent. And last year, with our food sovereignty and land circle, we discussed, the need of these historical and ancestral lands, of being of retention of those in order to be receiving communities in terms of climate disruption and other impacts. So these issues, again, like I mentioned, this water, lack thereof, or an abundance in terms of the hurricanes and so on, are all inextricably linked. And so we're as we go through the process of looking at the impacts of climate disruption and people of African descent, these are the things that we are talking about, particularly this year, in looking at water. So with that, I'll transition and remind you that this year that we are talking about water access and water quality issues, sea level rise and subsiding land. We'll be continuing to talk about food education and urban and agricultural land retention, rural agricultural land retention, and rural and urban land connections throughout this. I am going to switch back and look at some of the questions and the chat box. And this question came from, one of the first questions came from Kimberly Fogg, and I believe it was for Rabia, Al-Noor, and Fred. Do you invite people to come and help clean up the rivers? And do you invite schools to participate in the ceremonies?
So in reverse order, we didn't invite schools specifically to participate in the most recent event. I think because it was the first time we had tried this and we just didn't know all the moving parts. And what was the other question had to do with?
Are you inviting people to help clean up the rivers?
We are, but keep in mind too, even though we run and largely created the annual Patuxent cleanup, it is a 7-county event along our river. The river runs about 110 miles, and we have cleanup folks out every April, and we run specialized cleanups on request. But the things that people can pick up, with a litter getter or some gloves or a trash thing, that's actually not what is bringing down the marine life in the river. It's the stuff you can't see. It's the stuff that comes out of coal-burning power plants, discharge pipes from wastewater plants, PCBs, from outdated old transformers. So that I'm not squashing the importance of doing community participation in trash cleanups, but in truth, a lot of our work is litigating against known intractable polluters that are putting mercury, arsenic, selenium, and other heavy metals, not to mention other toxins, into the water supply, much of which is not being monitored or tracked, incidentally, by the authorities. They'd rather not know, to be honest. Every time we ask them, are you guys testing the water for endocrine disruptors? And they say, well, no. I mean, it's not funny, it's outrageous, but that's kind of the culture.
Right.
So long-winded answer to your question, but that's a thorough answer.
No. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as far as the ceremonies go, we, as Fred said, our outreach was locally and on Facebook. We created an Honoring Our Sacred Rivers webpage on Facebook. It was tweeted about, and it was more locally known, but we intend to do more of these ceremonies and encourage more people to reach out to us, and we would love to have schools participate. We are in conversation now about how we can outreach more widely to get more participation and do teach-ins, and I do speaking, at engagements and convening circles to teach, as well as Fred does too. He goes all over the country and speaks on the same topic, but we would certainly like to have you come on board and us with you on doing things jointly. I'm done.
Thank you, Rabia and Fred. And I'll tell you one thing about this group. For those of you who've just joined, who just joined the circle, you can't get rid of us. Ask Nancy. It was a chance meeting, and she has not been able to get rid of me since. So we look forward to coming on. Fred, I had a question for you. If I have my geography correct, there's farming along the river.
Well, there is. In fact, my family has a farm that's been in the family about 100 years, actually, right near the river. They grew tobacco and cotton back in the day. But yeah, I'm sorry, what was the rest of the question? Well,
I know in Florida we have a major problem with the fertilizer runoff and getting into the aquifer, and that being, so that connection about the type of farming that is done. And when you mentioned the unseen pollutants, that was the reason for my question.
Yeah, actually, the EPA says that the fertilizers and the manure runoff on the eastern shore, on the Delmarva Peninsula, is the single biggest source of the water quality decline in the Chesapeake Bay. On the Patuxent, people say, again, it's not funny, but they say it laughingly, that blacktop is the last crop on a lot of these sites, that we're losing farms faster than anything. They're becoming, shopping centers and commercial developments and things of that sort. So really, the type of farming that my family did in its heyday is almost extinct. on the Patuxent. These are farms in name only.
Right.
Hey, Beverly. Hi, this is Charles.
Hi, Charles.
I can't use the chat for Q&A.
Right. Go
I guess
ahead.
a lot of others may have that problem also.
Okay.
You know, I have a host of questions for both Nancy and Kimberly, and really even Fred and others. But Nancy and Kimberly, how involved is the local public health representative in those communities that you're in? How involved are they in that, in promoting what you're doing, and because you're looking at a cultural change, you know, changing people's habits, the way they do things, and in the 21st century, it's like, why are we behind the curve? You know, and I look at that and think about that all the time. Why are we behind the curve? And I say that collectively. But how involved is, I know local governments are, but has the public health sector built itself up to employ people, get someone at the lowest level on the ground to build that system up?
Well, this is Kimberly. We actually started off with the district education officer, and it took us a minute to try to get them to listen to us and to try to get us in the school. But what really turned around was when the new district medical officer came on board, and he happened to be an infectious disease specialist. And so the government turned over all of the health initiatives over to the medical district officer. And once he took over, he understood totally what it meant to provide access to clean water, not only for the children in the primary and secondary schools, but also to people who were suffering living with HIV. And then other chronic diseases in their community. So it wasn't until the medical district officer came that we really did have a difference in being able to go into the more schools. He and his staff went into the communities with us, into some of the villages that we were not participating in. So that, for me, that was just amazing. Dr. Yukio is just an amazing person, and he really helped a lot.
Yeah, because you know, like I'm looking at Sierra Leone getting Liberia and that issue there, and it's like you're looking at a real cultural issue, and you know, and I really like what you did, even with the individuals in the community that suffer, well, not suffer from that, have albinism, and how that is being addressed to change that culture and make sure they get those services. You know, so great work you're doing there.
Thank you. Let me just say one thing about the albino community. We are participating in the only school in all of Tanzania that houses albino children. And we were able to partner with the parents and provide them with filters, because they can't necessarily just go out and gather water, because they're being hunted for their bones, because the witch doctors, it's still very prevalent that they kill albino children and albino people, period, because they think that there's some magical, mystical thing about their albinoism. So thank you, Charles, for mentioning that, because that really was huge for us, because that really has prevented a lot of the parents and their children from having to go and gather water and run the risk of being killed.
Can I just point out that there's a huge component within the environmental community that sees environmental activism as revolving entirely around the issues that fund them, right? And public health is a much broader cast, right, than nature saving, right? So for the most part, the activism required to protect local water doesn't reside within causes that are primarily interested in saving trees and various bird species. And I'm not poo-pooing this. Those are important values too. But I'm saying the origins of the environmental movement in this country was built largely on privilege, not on equity. And a lot of the water-based causes we encounter are sheer environmental justice issues, pure and simple, for which there's really no natural habitat within the large environmental movements that have built their appeals to their supporters around anything but equity. It's about saving the sailing, saving the crabs, saving the oysters, saving the hiking trails, saving the kayaking trails, things of that sort. So that's a disparity conceptually within the environmental movement about where the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would agree. And I mean that in addition to my self-interest in living in Florida, you know, you sort of start what is essential. It's like the transboundary issues of water and air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a tough one because it leads wherever it leads, right? And I think the problem is most of these organizations have been funded to do particular work, whether it's climate related or it's, you know, it is whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But local water is a community-based, very local problem. It seems kind of small picture. It lacks octane for a lot of these. I mean, that's why you can have a Flint going on, right? Where the environmental community is blithely, you know, working on other stuff, assuming that someone's got this under control, when in fact, you know, far from it.
And that's what I advocate. It's a local issue, and everyone has to be involved in that. You know, when you look at, you know, you talked about pollutants in the water, you know, local farming, that's something that even the farmers will expect. You know, it's almost like you can't make it a closed system where it comes right back into the farming industry with the runoff into the streams. But then when you look at what the normal drugs people take are getting into the stream, getting into their water. You know, fentanyl.
Right.
You know, I've never had fentanyl, but it's in my water.
No, yeah, I totally get it. No, the fiction that has been put out there is that people of color in particular don't care about the environment. And so we've been taken out of the equation, the assumption being that we're environmentally illiterate and need to be brought up to speed on the issues that are really and truly important. So our ability to even raise issues of local import, of local concern, of common decency, frankly, when we're talking sometimes about some of these public health problems that are environmental in their nexus, it's almost impossible for us to advance that conversation because the issues have already been defined by these large groups in their, you know, in their fundraising programs or their surveys or their constituencies. They don't experience those problems. And so they're not important problems on their radar screen because they're not their problems.
Yeah. Well, I would say also that and you will hear it. Hopefully, this is the first time you'll hear it. We hear a lot of discussion about frontline and fence line communities, and I began to talk about our communities as being waterline communities, both from the flooding issues that don't get addressed. The water quality issues like Flint is not unique, and our experience with in the Southeast with hurricanes and tornadoes. So I'm talking waterline communities now.
I
don't want to take up any other questions, but one other area, you know, when you look at, and forgive me, Beverly, when I even look at the United Nations Stewardship Program and the Water Stewardship Program, and I just tell local communities, look, corporations, they're the stewards, but they're entities, they're a member of the community. They just have deeper financial pockets, but we cannot let them rule the water security issue within our local area. I just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you very much. We began a little late, and we are now coming up on an hour for our broadcast. I would like to give the panelists or anyone else engaged on the webinar an opportunity to ask any final questions, make any final comments. And so we'll just go around and any comments or questions or so on, please do so, and then I'll wrap up.
Well, I'm good. I'm just thrilled that we did this, and I think these types of conversations are great because it expands the bandwidth of what we can talk about with respect to, you know, the environment, sense of place, equity, all of those. They're all connected.
Well, I would like to say that I I know for sure that we need to definitely be talking about this in the schools. I think the most receptive minds are the children, and when you teach them something about this, it goes right to their heart and their spirit, and they will become the champions, and they are the future. So I think it's imperative that we develop materials. We do, invite people to the river and other things, because even with in terms of the medicine and things that grow along the in the ground that's abundant, that if you teach a child about something, self-care, my nieces were out playing, my niece and my nephew, and he put himself, and her grandmother had taught her which plants that were growing abundantly there were used for cuts and things like that. And she said, just sit down and stop crying. Look, I'll show you what to do. And she went and picked the leaves and crushed them and put them on his little boo-boo. And he was a happy little camper after that. It stopped hurting and he was fine. But just, it's just kids are so excited about everything. And I noticed too that during these ceremonies, when the kids came out, they were in it 100%. They started telling everybody that they could see, you have to respect the water. You have to pray for the water. The water is what gives us life. It's the whole slogan from Standing Rock. It was a 2-year-old little girl that came up with water is life. She was listening to the conversation and she came in the room and said, well, water is life. You can't live without water. You can go days without food, but you can't go very long without water. So I just want to bring that up again, that educate, and revisit with people the notion that we are outside of this conversation. We're very much in the conversation. We are very important to the conversation, and we need to get back in people's minds that they need to participate.
Well, this is Kimberly, and I want to piggyback on that because our slogan is basically water is a lifeline for life. So that little 2-year-old is right on the mark. And then also piggybacking on what you're talking about in terms of including the children. And that's why I asked the question if the children were participating in your ceremonies, because you're absolutely right. They're the ones that are the sponges. And I also work with our American schools who actually have fundraisers. World Water Day is tomorrow, so that they can help purchase filters for their sister schools in Africa. So I think that children should be so part of the conversation because, they are, I always say that, we're building our future community development leaders in Africa and in America. So that's my 2 cents. And it was so great to meet all of you over the forum.
Nancy, any closing comments or questions or whatever? We may have lost Nancy.
And thank you, Beverly.
Oh, no, thank you all. I want to thank all of the participants, panelists, attendees. This has been great. We hope to be able to do another webinar before the side event to talk more about the content of that. All of the consulting partners and everyone. Again, tomorrow is World Water Day, which was why we wanted to pull this webinar together. The webinar has been recorded. I will also make available to all of the attendees or registrants for the webinar the slideshow. I will give you a notice when the webinar goes up online. Here is the again the logos of some of our partners in the coalition. Thank you all so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and I will be in touch.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you.
Bye now. Thanks again. Bye now.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.